Hi, my name is Chris Bevington, and I'm a Minnesotan. I'm here because I feel compelled to testify to what is happening in Minnesota right now, January 16th, 2026. First, a bit about me. I was born in Minneapolis, and I've lived here for 15 out of 18 years of my childhood. I studied computer science at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. And for my first job out of college, I moved from Minneapolis down to Kansas City for several years to start my career at a medical technology company called Cerner. I consider that first job as one of the most fortunate decisions I've ever had the opportunity to make. I managed to find a job in the midst of a recession with a high demand for technical skills and plenty of meaningful work in what I consider the most critical industry, healthcare. Spent about 10 years as a solution architect and road warrior, working with dozens of hospitals and health systems across the United States and the world. After that first 10 years, I spent the next six or so moving on into a more analytics dedicated role and assisting some of the largest integrated federal healthcare delivery systems implement healthcare systems. The reason why I'm making this video is because there is an active campaign of domestic terror being inflicted upon my home state by the federal government. Just as the Diary of Anne Frank has become an instrumental primary source in understanding the rise and proliferation of unjust authoritarianism and ethnic persecution in 1940s Germany, I think it's critical to create and preserve as many primary sources as possible, as we are currently, once again, living through historic times. So, what does it feel like to live in Minnesota right now? I live in St. Louis Park. This is a first ring suburb just west of Minneapolis. 2020 census data puts our 50,000 residents at 77% white. In my 7 years of living in St. Louis Park, I have never once felt at danger from anyone in my community. Have never felt, or never personally or secondhand witnessed or been impacted by any crime. I've maybe heard emergency sirens once or twice a month in the summer when the weather's nice enough to have my windows open. But other than that, St. Louis Park is an idyllic place to live. My community right now, though, is in a constant, acute state of vigilance and terror. Just as I and every American I have ever asked can remember exactly where I was on 9/11, 2001, I will never forget this week. I will remember the whistles that are blown every time a community member spots a vehicle filled with masked, armed, poorly trained agents on a mission to abduct anyone they can out of my community. They target the most vulnerable members of the community. They target primarily anyone who is not white or looks like they are an easy target if they are not moving around in a group, if they are alone. They are actively rounding up the homeless at encampments and under bridges. They are stalking shopping malls and asking citizens for their papers. They are violating law enforcement policies at hospitals, and they are stalking and running plates in elementary school parking lots. They liberally and without any provocation or justification deploy riot control and chemical weapons, including pepper balls, flashbangs, and notoriously carcinogenic hexachloroethane smoke in residential communities. This is having an intensely chilling effect on the local populace and on the local economy. A significant portion of the community does not feel safe leaving their houses, while masked agents prolifically abduct residents, both documented and undocumented. The cost to the state is also immense, with the cost of overtime to Minnesota law enforcement already in the tens of millions of dollars for 2026 and climbing. There is not an end in sight. Renee Good's death still weighs incredibly heavily on all of us. For me, though, the moment when it was most apparent that this is truly an all hands emergency, that I needed to muster every scrap of connection I have to my colleagues, every bit of skill I have in video presentation and outreach, and every bit of privilege I have as a 15 plus year career salaried corporate worker. The moment when I knew that it was an all hands emergency and that I needed to do that is when I saw what can only be described as a deliberate and extreme act of intimidation at Aquila Park Elementary School, about 10 blocks from my home. There's a video that I've posted in the Reddit link below. I'll go ahead and describe to you what the contents of that video are, but I implore you to watch it. At approximately 2:30 p.m. on Wednesday, January 14th, 5 vehicles are seen in the rotunda for a 3-story medium density residential building in the Aquila neighborhood, directly across the street from Aquila Park Elementary School, and at the time of that school's dismissal. The point of view in the video is from a legal observer's cell phone camera, and multiple high-pitched whistles can be heard immediately as the shot begins. The camera pans over about a dozen masked, armored men, slowly milling towards their vehicles as more whistles and terrified shouts of the parents who were there to pick up their children from school can be heard. I have never believed that something like this could happen in my own community. Really, if there's any silver lining, it's that that community response wasn't by chance. In St. Louis Park, as with school districts and communities across the Twin Cities metro, we have really seen people rally together to protect and care for those who are most vulnerable during this occupation. The Department of Homeland Security has become an unlawful, masked, militarized force that is actively being leveraged to inflict domestic terrorism on American citizens. The federal government has given every indication that this is an intentional act of political retribution and has only escalated and continued to stoke chaos, unrest, and acute terror on the state of Minnesota. In response to the killing of an American citizen and mother by federal agents on January 7th, 2026, the administration immediately and boldly lied about the circumstances and reality of the killing, and has to date prevented both federal and local authorities from any sort of investigation, specifically barring any chance of justice. This gaslighting by the federal administration is cruel, prolific, and completely disingenuous. My entire life has been largely impacted positively by the federal government. My grandfather fought in World War II. My father moved our family to Minneapolis to leverage his PhD in electrical engineering in order to aid national defense with the defense contractors headquartered here. And he worked in the high-tech defense contracting industry for over 30 years. I started my career in the medical technology field right out of undergrad. And after about 10 years in, I too was called to use my skills and knowledge in support of federal contracts for the benefit of our uniformed service members through their periods of service and veterancy. I have worked directly with some of the most capable, mission-driven, professional public servants that I have ever met on those projects. It is clear to me that there are still many federal employees that truly believe in the federal government and the missions that they support every day. The actions that the federal government are inflicting on my community in January 2026 have inflicted an irreparable wound in the trust that I have for the federal government. As somebody who has been protected by and aligned with the government for multiple generations, this betrayal feels especially severe. We must first and foremost demand an end to the occupation in Minnesota. I need your voices. There are blatantly unconstitutional and incredibly dangerous things happening here, and it is entirely being inflicted and continually agitated by the federal government. We must continue to let the rest of America and the rest of the world know what is going on here. The Department of Homeland Security Metro Storm operation is blatantly unconstitutional, unforgivably immoral, and the United States federal government is the sole aggressor and adjutant here in Minnesota. Compounding this, the federal government administration has shown no remorse and continues to escalate unrest with the largest and most effective targeted domestic terror campaign the United States has ever seen. Please share this message. Share this with anyone who needs to understand more directly what is happening in Minnesota right now, January 2026. Because I sincerely hope that nobody else has to fear hearing whistles when they're picking their kids up from school.